Hilchos Shara Avos Hatumos, Perek Sheni, the laws of the remaining primary sources of impurity, chapter 2. The first topic in this set of laws is nevela, the dead animal. As we've seen, it means different things for different types of animals. If it's non-kosher, any type of death. If it's kosher, death outside of shechita. And yesterday we learned which parts of the animal transmit the tumah of nevela. Today we're going to be more defining what's called dead. At what point is an animal dead? And what happens if parts of an animal get severed after death or before death? Are those considered nevela as well? We'll also talk about what's the status of a treifa, animal which is mortally wounded. Can that become a nevela? And many other laws that are interestingly related to the topic of nevela. This will be the second day. Tomorrow we'll have one more day on nevela. Then we move on to the next category in these laws. It says that Rambam halacha aleph. We want to know at what point does an animal become a nevela. So we begin with the case of behema chaya tmeya, a non-kosher animal or beast. Non-kosher animal or beast, we learned yesterday, no matter how you kill it, it always becomes a nevela. But we're going to see today that if you did shechita, if you chose to kill it in the way that Jews typically kill kosher animals, there's a slight difference between the status of the animal in this case versus if you would have killed it a different way. And what is that slight difference? The slight difference is regarding the status of the animal in the moment after the killing, while it's still convulsing. As the Rambam immediately says, you have a non-kosher animal or beast which you chose to slaughter using the ritual of shechita. So first off, while it's convulsing, it's not a nevela. While it's still moving around, you can't consider it a carcass. Until it dies completely, or until you behead it. If you behead it, even if it's convulsing, it's considered a nevela at that point. However, and this is the key point here, since you slaughtered it in a way that's acceptable for Jewish people, so even though we're not yet ready to consider it fully dead, we're not either going to consider it fully alive. It is going to be considered like impure food. Because since when a Jew does shechita to an animal on his own, it already takes it out of the category of what's called Eiver min achai. It's no longer considered a live animal even while it's convulsing. So in this case, when it's a non-kosher animal, the fact that you did shechita also makes it considered to be already food. Even if not a dead carcass yet, but it now has a status of food, no longer a live animal in the sense that it can become impure in the way that food can become impure. And it's considered like impure food. Whereas nechara, if you tore it open, you didn't do the slaughtering, and it's still convulsing. So not only is it not considered to be fully dead, it's literally considered fully alive. While it's convulsing, it isn't even impure at the status of impure foods. Because since had a Jew done this act to his animal, it wouldn't make it no longer Eiver min achai. Therefore, for a guy, it doesn't work either. If you have an animal which is convulsing, it's just been slaughtered or killed, and now one limb gets severed. A limb means, according to halacha, it has flesh, it has sinews, it has bones. No matter how it was killed, for non-Jews, which one of the 7 Noahide laws is Eiver min achai, they cannot eat limbs from live animals. This is considered a limb from a live animal. And they wouldn't be able to eat it. Ubasar, haparish mimena, if just raw meat, not a full limb, would sever from this animal while it's convulsing, it would be kaparish min achai. It would be like meat that comes off of a live animal, which is also forbidden to a non-Jew. Similarly, to you have a kosher animal, but it wasn't slaughtered properly. There was a disqualifying factor in the slaughter, and it's still convulsing. Or shachat ba'echad, you only had slaughtered one of the pipes. For shechita, you got to slaughter both pipes for an animal. You slaughter only one pipe, or a majority of one pipe, meaning you didn't do a kosher shechita. Ein batuma klal ad she'tamos. There's no impurity at all, even the food impurity, until it dies. Because the key factor is always whether the act that you did would be kosher or acceptable for a Jewish slaughter. In this case, it wouldn't be a good slaughter for Jews. Therefore, it doesn't take it out of the realm of Eiver min achai, and therefore, it cannot consider it food while it's convulsing. If you cut the animal literally in 2 pieces, or you took out the thigh, one of the hind legs, in such a way that it created a hollow inside. You took it with the bone attached to the joint. This is a picture from the Chitra that I very, very much like. This is the concept. You took the thigh out with the bone. The way that Rambam describes it elsewhere, even if the animal will crouch, you'll see that it's missing a piece. Harezu nevela. Right here, it's considered dead for all practical purposes. Fascinatingly, even though it's still alive, it transmits impurity through touching and carrying like a nevela. Same thing if you tore it open at its back, or a majority of the spinal bone by the neck was broken with most of the meat attached to it, was cut off. At that point it's a nevela, it's literally may as well be dead. If an animal lost its fetus in utero, and the shepherd who's taking care of the animals puts his hand in to touch this dead fetus, whether it's kosher or non-kosher animal, the one who touched it is pure, because while it's still in the womb, it's not considered to be its own entity, until the stillborn comes out to the airspace of the world, then it will transmit impurity. Halacha gimel basar hapirish, meat that's cut off, from an animal or from a beast while they're alive. Whether it's pure or impure, kosher or non-kosher, well, if it happened while it was still alive, it's totally pure, it's not a nevela. But if it's a full limb, flesh, sinews, and bones, it does transmit impurity like a nevela, as the sages derive from the verses. Whether that limb came from the animal itself, or a limb came out from a fetus in its stomach. As long as it's a full limb, it's considered to be a nevela. The requisite size of a limb, there's no minimum size. Even if it's like barley corn or less, it makes you impure. Again, as long as it's the way it was created, flesh, sinews, and bones. The yiyal of basar kedei lahalis arucha, has to be also enough meat to be able, that were it to be attached to the animal, it would be able to regenerate itself. If there wasn't enough quantity of meat to be able to regenerate had it been attached to the animal, or some of the bone is missing, then it's pure. It's not a limb, so it's not going to be communicating nevela impurity. Halacha daled hakilya, v'halashain, v'hasafa, v'chayetze b'hen. The kidney. I just posted it yesterday in the class. I thought it was very interesting. This is the kidney of an animal, or a tongue, or a lip, or things like it. Even though they're classified as limbs, they cannot regenerate. If you cut out a kidney, that's it, you don't have a kidney anymore. Or the tongue. Since they don't have a bone, they're not considered an aver by these standards, only basar. And therefore, if they would sever from a live animal, they would not be impure on account of nevela. Halacha hey. Meat or a limb that's hanging off of an animal. Kind of a little dislodged, not fully. They're not able to physically reattach to the body. Nevertheless, they don't transmit impurity of nevela as long as the animal is alive. But they do have like this interim status. They become like food. If they become susceptible to impurity by liquid touching them, then they could become mekabelin tuma bim kaiman. They can become impure in their place. But they're not considered full nevela. Nishchata behema. Once the animal is slaughtered, huchshiru bashchita. The slaughter itself makes this hanging limb susceptible to impurity because the blood of the shchita is one of the 7 qualifying liquids that I mentioned yesterday. And at that point, they become mukhshar, they become like food that can become impure. Interestingly, they still do not transmit impurity of a nevela. Because the slaughtering doesn't make them to be considered as if they were severed from the lifetime. They're considered to be attached to the animal during the shchita as well. And because shchita makes an animal pure from nevela, it makes these hanging limbs also pure. But were the animal to die of natural causes, the meat that was hanging off of it, if it was to become impure, would be required to come into contact with one of the 7 liquids. And the limb would continue to be transmitting impurity as Aver Menachai, as a limb which separated during lifetime. Interesting thing. While it's alive, we're not going to consider it fully severed. But once it died, we're going to retroactively declare it to be limb from a live animal. Then doesn't require contact with liquid. It's not considered to be a limb of a nevela because we do consider it, looking backwards, as a limb which separated from the live animal. Okay, bottom line, who cares? If Ever Min Achai, we anyway said before, is like a nevela. So what's the difference? Ever Min Achai, Ever Min a nevela. Sha'basar ha'peiresh, may Ever Min Achai, because once you have a limb that got severed, if then meat gets severed from that limb, tahar, it's pure. Whereas meat that separates off of a limb from a nevela still is a nevela. It will make you impure with an all-size portion of touching or carrying. But either way, what qualifies as a limb, there's no requisite size, whether it came from a live animal or from a dead one. Halacha vav, treifa. What about an animal which is forbidden to be eaten because it got a mortal wound? It's going to die within 12 months. And then in the status of treifa, it was slaughtered properly. Even though it's forbidden to be eaten, it becomes pure from nevela. Shchita makes it kosher, makes it pure, excuse me. Same thing if a person were to slaughter an animal and find in it a dead fetus, the slaughtering you did to the mom makes it also pure from being a nevela. What if you slaughter an animal? Okay, I don't want to make a gory picture of a dead animal, so we'll just show a live animal, okay? And you find a fetus inside the mom alive in 8 months. It's not a full term. Nitraf, it becomes considered a treifa because its mom is dead, it's premature, so it can't live on its own. Even if you slaughtered the animal, this baby, after it became a treifa, and we just said before that if it's an animal that's a treifa and slaughtered later, it becomes pure. Here not. Slaughtering it will not help you. Because the concept of ritual slaughter doesn't apply to fetuses. So slaughtering can't help you take it away from the status of impurity. Therefore, if an animal gives birth to a live baby, but it didn't survive for 7 days yet, if you slaughtered it during the 7 days, the shchita won't make it pure, and it will still be considered a nevela, because during the first 7 days, since you can't bring it for a sacrifice, that means it's not considered halakhically viable. So slaughtering it will not have the effect of making it pure. Now the commentators do say it stays impure out of doubt only, not definitely impure. What if you slaughter an animal, last case was 8-month-old, premature. What if it's full term? You find the 9-month-old baby alive in the mother's stomach. But it hasn't yet walked on the ground. It's literally in the mom's system. Even though there's a very unique law here. It's called the ben pakua. You find the 9-month-old baby in the mom's stomach. It doesn't have to be slaughtered if the mom was slaughtered. The slaughtering of the mom purifies it in terms of kosherness, doesn't have to be slaughtered. Nevertheless, if the mom becomes impure, it's pure on nevela accounts, but let's say it becomes impure in a different way, the baby won't become impure. If the mom was slaughtered improperly, it remains pure. The reason being, a live animal cannot become impure. Not food impurity, not nevela impurity. Even though for other issues it would be considered a limb, literally a limb of the mom, but not for these issues of purity. But if it died, this 9-month-old baby that you found in the stomach, it died afterwards. If it didn't walk on the ground yet, it's pure. We say that its mom's shchita made it kosher. It's literally permitted to eat it, as long as it didn't walk on the ground, and hence it doesn't become a nevela either when it dies. If it walked on the ground, as the commentaries say, then since it requires its own shchita anyways, so it's not relying on its mom's shchita, so then it becomes a nevela and also makes you impure in that way. Halacha ches treifa shenishchata. You have an animal with a mortal wound and it was slaughtered. Even though we said before that it's pure, biblically. If sacrificial meat touches it, it becomes impure rabbinically. Because this is a stringency that was imposed by the rabbis in sacrificial meat. We'll see many more of these later on in these laws. Kodesh is in a separate category. Halacha tes, the animal is struggling to give birth. The fetus puts out its hand, and because of the circumstances, you had to cut off the hand. And then you slaughter the mom. Slaughtering the mom with the fetus inside of it takes care of the fetus in terms of purity and kosherness. But that limb which you cut off is a nevela. Ush'ar b'sara ubar tar, the rest of it is pure. Shachat es imay v'achar kachatcha. If the animal stuck out its hand, and while it stuck out, you didn't cut it yet, you slaughtered the mom. Ha'ever kitreifa shenishchata. The limb is like a treifa which was slaughtered, and is therefore pure. Ushar b'sara ubar. Interestingly, the rest of the meat of the fetus, maga treifa shchuta, is considered to have touched treifa, which is slaughtered, which we said before, while it's typically considered pure, with regards to sacrificial meat, we're going to consider it impure because it touched the limb on the outside, which is treifa, and it's called treifa shchuta, slaughtered treif meat. This is an incredibly detailed question. You were in the middle of slaughtering the mom, you finished slaughtering one pipe, the windpipe, and then the baby stuck out its hand, and then you slaughter the second pipe. The chatcha, and after you finish slaughtering, you cut the limb. The two pipes, slaughtering, combine, and we allow the entire limb to be considered to be pure. It's not a nevela. Halacha yod shchita sanachri. When a Gentile slaughters, nevela, it has no significance whatsoever. The animal is considered dead. Nevela, metami b'masa. The animal that he slaughtered makes you impure if you carry it. Even if a Jew is supervising, and he used a very, very beautiful knife. Shchita karoi, proper shchita, makes no difference. Whether it's a full-on Gentile idol worshipping, or it's a kusi, which is a Kuthian, the Jews that were a little bit questionable if their conversion was good or not, or a resident alien, he keeps 7 Noahide laws, makes no difference. The Karev be'ena, says the Rambam, it seems approximate, close in my eyes to say this. Sha'af zemi divrei seifrim, this is a rabbinic imposition. Sha'arei tumas aveidah zara ve'tumas tikruvta midivreim, because the whole impurity of idol worship, anything offered to it, is rabbinic. K'moi she'yizbar, as will be explained in chapter 6. U'b'glal aveidah zara nisrachaku agayim v'nesra shchitasan. It's because of idol worship that we distanced Gentiles and their slaughtering. So therefore, this prohibition of shchita, of a goy becoming a nevela, must be rabbinic. This not prohibition, this imposition of impurity must be rabbinic. You're going to ask me, says the Rambam, when a Gentile slaughters, it's biblically forbidden, it's not kosher biblically. You should know this. Not everything that's forbidden to eat makes you impure. We just had an example. Animal's a mortal wound, you can't eat, it's not kosher, but if you slaughter it, it becomes pure. So, therefore, it's very possible that this shchita of a goy is only considered a nevela midrabanan, rabbinically. And since that's the case, if somebody were to touch this animal slaughtered by a goy, which is a nevela, and then go in that state to the temple or eat sacrificial meat, you couldn't make him liable to excision unless you have a clear proof that it's biblical. If not, not. Gud Aleph, kulis hanevela. Kulis is a general name for closed bones, like the femur bone, or many of these bones in the joints of the hands or legs. They're closed on both sides. But there's marrow inside it. And remember that marrow is considered to be nevela. If you touch it or carry it, you're pure. Even if there's a kazayas of marrow inside of it. And why is that? Because any entity of a nevela which cannot transmit impurity through touching, cannot through carrying either. You can't touch the marrow inside, so even carrying it is not a problem. Nikva kol shehu, if you made a hole in it, hanegeya, or got a hole, hanegeya by neisa tameh. At this point, you can touch the marrow inside of it. Since you can touch it and become impure, also when you carry it, you become impure. When do we say this? The earlier part of the case, that a non-punctured bone is not going to make you impure. If you could hear that the marrow was dislodged, it's moving around, it's jostling around in the bone. It's not going to heal. But if it was in its place and nice and moist, if the marrow is so powerful that it could actually regenerate the bone to produce meat on it, had it been in the animal, then it makes you impure, not because of the bone or because of the marrow, because it's a full limb. It could regenerate. We already explained that a kulis means a bone that's sealed on both sides. You have a kulis, and you decided to make a hole in it. But you didn't make a hole yet. When you touch it, you are doubtfully impure. It's a doubt in this matter halachically. Is a lack of puncture considered a lack of action or not a lack of action? If it's a lack of action, so then there's no way to touch it, so you won't become impure. But if the fact that you thought about it is already considered to be like an action, there's no lack of action here, so then, just like when you made a hole itself, it would make you impure. So in this case also, it should become a nevela and make you impure. In this case, we're in doubt, and so we treat it like any impurity out of doubt.